The first king screamed for 3 days before anyone dared to open the throne room. When the heavy oak doors finally creaked apart, the kingdom's bravest knights stepped inside expecting to find an assassin, or perhaps an invading demon. Instead, they found claw marks carved into marble pillars. The royal throne had been shattered into splinters. The stained glass windows were broken from the inside, and where the greatest ruler the kingdom had ever known had once sat, there was only a creature with burning golden eyes, black horns twisting from its skull, and a crown still resting upon its monstrous head. It did not attack. It simply looked at them, as though somewhere inside that terrible body, the king was still trapped. No one ever saw him again. For 500 years, the sacred crown waited, and every ruler who dared to wear it suffered the exact same fate. Some transformed within minutes. Others resisted for days. One queen managed to fight the curse for nearly a month before disappearing into the mountains, where travelers still claimed to hear her cries whenever storms rolled across the peaks. The kingdom survived, but it was no longer ruled. It was haunted. No child was allowed near the Hall of Kings. No servant dared polish the ancient throne. The royal chamber remained sealed behind 7 enchanted gates, forged by the greatest mages in history. The crown still rested upon its velvet cushion, untouched, watching, waiting. The old stories said it had once belonged to the first guardian of mankind, a king chosen not by people but by the stars themselves. He had united countless lands, defeated monsters born from darkness, and forged peace where endless war had ruled. The gods rewarded him with a crown crafted from celestial gold, a symbol of wisdom, justice, sacrifice. At least, that was the story everyone knew. The older legends, the ones whispered only among the oldest librarians and forgotten monks, told something different. They claimed the crown had never been a reward. It had always been a prison. No one knew which story was true anymore. After centuries, legends become memories. Memories become myths. And myths become excuses to stop asking questions. Life moved on. The kingdom adapted. Instead of kings, a council of regents governed the land. Every major decision required unanimous agreement. No single person could hold absolute power again. At first, people believed this would finally break the curse. Perhaps greed had been the true monster all along. Perhaps no crown meant no corruption. For generations, it worked. The cities flourished. Trade expanded beyond the mountains. Magic academies welcomed students from distant kingdoms. Children grew up believing dragons, curses, and monsters belonged only inside old bedtime stories. Until the sky changed. It happened without warning. One peaceful afternoon, every bell in the capital rang at once. Not because someone pulled the ropes, because the bells themselves began to shake. Birds abandoned the city. Dogs hid beneath wagons. The horses refused to move. Then the sun vanished, not behind clouds, behind something enormous. A shadow drifted across the heavens. Slowly, silently. Everyone looked upward. Floating above the kingdom was an island made entirely of black stone. Ruins covered its surface, broken towers, collapsed temples, statues larger than castles. Nobody had ever seen it before, yet every historian recognized it instantly. The lost kingdom of Arion, a city believed destroyed 1,000 years earlier. It should not have existed. It certainly should not have been flying. As people watched in terrified silence, one enormous piece of the floating island broke away. It fell like a meteor. The impact shook the earth for miles. A forest disappeared beneath dust. Villages nearby reported strange lights during the following nights. Then came the nightmares. People dreamed of the same voice, young, calm, patient. The crown must awaken. No one knew what it meant. But the dreams spread from village to village. Even children described the exact same words. Within weeks, people stopped sleeping. The council ordered scholars, priests, and mages to investigate. None found answers, only more questions, until a shepherd boy stumbled upon something impossible. His name was Rowan. He wasn't a knight. He wasn't a prince. He wasn't even particularly brave. He lived with his older sister Mira on a small hillside farm overlooking the River Eldon after their parents disappeared during a winter expedition years before. Every morning followed the same routine: feed the sheep, repair fences, carry water, avoid trouble. Rowan loved stories far more than work. Whenever chores ended, he climbed the tallest hill carrying books borrowed from the monastery library. His favorite tales were about forgotten kingdoms, magical relics, and heroes whose courage changed history. Mira laughed whenever she caught him reading. Books won't keep wolves away. No, Rowan always replied, but they might tell us why wolves howl. She would roll her eyes. And that's exactly why you spend more time asking questions than finishing chores. She wasn't wrong. Questions fascinated Rowan more than answers ever could, especially impossible ones, like why the floating island had appeared, or why everyone shared the same dream, or why every raven in the valley had suddenly begun flying east every sunrise. The birds never returned. One evening, while searching for a missing lamb near the forest, destroyed by the falling fragment, Rowan noticed something strange. The trees closest to the impact site had not burned. They had turned to crystal. Entire trunks shimmered like frozen glass beneath the moonlight. Leaves chimed softly whenever the wind touched them. Beautiful. Wrong. The deeper he walked, the quieter the forest became. No insects, no birds, no rustling branches, only silence. At the center of the crater stood a single doorway. Nothing else, no walls, no building, just an ancient stone arch covered in glowing symbols. It stood alone beneath the stars, as though waiting for someone. The symbols pulsed gently, almost like a heartbeat. Rowan stepped closer. He reached out. The instant his fingers brushed the stone, every symbol ignited. The ground trembled. A blinding beam of silver light erupted into the sky. Then the doorway spoke, not aloud, inside his mind. At last, Rowan stumbled backward. His heart pounded so violently he could barely breathe. The voice sounded ancient beyond imagination, neither male nor female, neither kind nor cruel, simply old. The heir has returned. I'm not anyone's heir, Rowan whispered. The voice ignored him. The prison weakens. The crown remembers. Find the last keeper before the beast awakens. Then the light vanished. The doorway became ordinary stone once more. No glow, no voice, no magic, as though nothing had happened. Rowan ran home faster than he ever had in his life. Of course, nobody believed him. The villagers blamed exhaustion. The priests called it temptation. Even Mira sighed. You've been reading too many legends. I heard it. I know. It knew my name. It didn't. You weren't there? No, she answered gently. But fear has a way of giving voices to silence. She wanted to protect him. That was obvious. Their parents had disappeared chasing impossible stories. She refused to lose Rowan to another. The next morning, she quietly hid every book he'd borrowed from the monastery. She believed that would end it. Instead, the dreams grew stronger. That night, Rowan saw the floating island clearly for the first time. He stood inside its ruined streets beneath an endless crimson sky. Thousands of empty suits of armor lined the roads. None moved, none breathed. Yet every helmet slowly turned to watch him as he passed. At the center of the city rose a throne carved from black crystal. Someone sat upon it. Their face remained hidden beneath a hood woven from shadows. Only one object reflected the crimson light, a golden crown. The same crown locked beneath 7 enchanted gates. The figure slowly lifted its head. Its eyes were completely human, filled not with hatred, but unbearable sorrow. When it spoke, Rowan woke with tears running down his face. Do not destroy the monster. Free the king. Morning arrived, but the dream refused to fade. Rowan could still hear those final words echoing inside his mind. Do not destroy the monster. Free the king. He barely touched his breakfast. Mira noticed immediately. You look like you haven't slept. I haven't. You dreamed again. Rowan nodded. It wasn't just a dream this time. She stopped slicing bread. Rowan, I saw the crown. Her face lost its color. You are never to say that word outside this house. Why? Because every family in this kingdom has buried someone because of that crown. She rarely spoke about the past. Now her hands trembled. When Father left on his last expedition, he wasn't looking for treasure. Rowan looked up. He was looking for answers. What answers? The same ones you're chasing. Silence filled the room. Our parents believed the curse wasn't what everyone thought. You knew? I knew enough to hate those stories. She walked toward an old wooden chest hidden beneath the stairs. For years, Rowan had assumed it contained winter blankets. Instead, Mira unlocked it with a tiny iron key she wore around her neck. Inside lay journals, maps, ancient sketches, and one faded drawing that made Rowan's blood run cold. It showed the exact doorway he had found inside the crater. Every crack, every symbol, every stone, even the pattern of glowing runes was identical. This, Rowan whispered, Father drew it 17 years ago. But that's impossible. He found another doorway. Where? No one knows. He disappeared before he could return. Rowan carefully turned another page. Dozens of notes filled the margins. Most were impossible to understand, but one sentence had been circled repeatedly. The crown does not create monsters. It reveals them. What does that mean? Mira slowly shook her head. He never explained. A sudden knock interrupted them. 3 loud strikes against the front door. Not villagers, soldiers. The moment Mira opened it, 6 royal guards stepped inside. Their polished armor carried the silver crest of the council. Behind them stood an elderly woman wearing deep blue robes embroidered with countless stars. Although Rowan had never met her, he recognized her instantly. High Archivist Celine, the greatest historian in the kingdom. Some claimed she remembered events that had happened before she was born. Others whispered she had never truly aged. Her silver eyes rested on Rowan. So, she smiled softly, the doorway chose you. Every instinct told Rowan to run. Instead, he asked, How do you know about it? Because I have spent 60 years waiting for someone to survive touching one. Mira stepped protectively between them. My brother isn't going anywhere. Selena nodded respectfully. I understand. Then she reached into her sleeve and revealed a crystal no larger than an apple. Inside the crystal floated a tiny golden flame. The moment Rowan saw it, the flame bent toward him, like a flower turning toward sunlight. The old woman's expression changed. "I was afraid of this." "What? You truly are connected." "Connected to what?" She hesitated, then quietly answered, "The first king." The room became impossibly still. Celine asked permission to enter. Hours passed as she explained truths that had been hidden for centuries. The official history was a lie. Not entirely, just enough to hide the most dangerous parts. According to forgotten records locked beneath the royal library, the sacred crown had never cursed rulers because they were unworthy. It transformed them because it was searching for someone capable of carrying something no human should ever possess. Long before kingdoms existed, before dragons vanished, before humans built cities, the world had nearly ended, not because of war, because of something older, something called the Hollow King. No one knew where it came from, only that it consumed identities instead of lives. Those it touched did not simply die. They forgot who they were. Then others forgot them too. Families vanished from memory. Entire villages disappeared from history. Books rewrote themselves. Even statues lost their faces. Existence itself unraveled wherever the Hollow King walked. At humanity's darkest hour, one warrior accepted an impossible bargain. He forged a prison using his own soul. The prison became the sacred crown. The warrior became its first guardian. His duty was eternal. As long as someone worthy wore the crown, the Hollow King remained asleep inside it, but every generation the prison slowly weakened. Its prisoner whispered, tempted, corrupted, until eventually guardian and prisoner became impossible to separate. The guardian transformed into a monster, not because he had failed, because he had sacrificed everything. Then another guardian had to replace him. The cycle repeated endlessly. Every monstrous king had not become evil. Every one of them had become a living prison. Rowan struggled to breathe. So they weren't cursed. They were protecting everyone. Celine lowered her eyes. Yes. Then why hide the truth? Because no kingdom willingly asks its greatest leader to become a monster. The realization crushed him. For centuries, people had hated their rulers, feared them, forgotten their sacrifice, all while those kings silently imprisoned the greatest evil the world had ever known. Rowan whispered, "Then why did my dream say, 'Free the king'?" For the first time, Celine looked afraid. "Because if the dream is telling the truth," she paused, "then somewhere one of the guardians is still alive. After 500 years, there should be nothing left. But dreams do not lie." Before Rowan could ask another question, the crystal flame suddenly exploded with light. Everyone shielded their eyes. A deep vibration rolled through the ground. Outside, people screamed. The floating island had moved, not drifting, descending. Massive pieces of black stone began falling from the sky like burning meteors. One crashed into the distant mountains, another struck the western sea, a third landed only a few miles from the capital. Within minutes, reports arrived from every direction. Creatures no one had ever seen before were emerging from the impact sites. Not animals, not demons. They resembled living shadows wrapped around broken suits of armor. Their eyes glowed pale silver. They never spoke. They simply walked toward the capital. Hundreds of them. Then thousands. The council declared a state of emergency. Every knight in the kingdom was mobilized. Ancient defensive walls that had not been used for centuries were reopened. Mages activated protective barriers around major cities. Still, The shadow creatures kept coming. No matter how many were destroyed, more emerged from the darkness. Celine watched silently from the library tower. They're searching? For what? She answered without looking away. For the crown. Meanwhile, Rowan could think of only one thing. The doorway. It had called him the heir. Why? He had no royal blood. At least, not that he knew. That night he secretly returned to the crater. The crystal forest had changed. The trees were taller. The glowing branches now stretched toward the doorway as though feeding it. This time, someone was waiting. An old man sat beside the stone arch, warming his hands over a tiny blue fire. His beard reached almost to the ground. His cloak looked stitched together from hundreds of different fabrics collected across countless lifetimes. He smiled before Rowan even spoke. I was wondering how long you'd take. You knew I'd come? I've been waiting several centuries. Rowan blinked. What? The old man laughed. Time becomes terribly confusing after your second 100 years. You've lived for centuries? Approximately. Who are you? The man stood slowly. My name has changed many times. He looked toward the floating island. But once, they called me the last keeper. Rowan felt his heartbeat quicken. The doorway had mentioned him. You know about the crown. I know almost everything. Then tell me why it chose me. The old man's cheerful expression disappeared. It didn't. It called me the heir. It called your soul. Rowan frowned. I don't understand. Of course you don't. The keeper gently touched Rowan's forehead. Instantly, the world vanished. Rowan stood inside another memory. Not a dream. A memory? He watched a battlefield stretching beyond the horizon. Mountains burned. Dragons circled overhead. Giants fought beside humans. The sky itself seemed torn apart by rivers of black lightning. At the center stood one man, young, golden armor, a radiant crown resting upon his head. He raised a sword toward an endless darkness approaching from the horizon. Beside him stood another figure, a child, no older than 12. The king knelt before the child, placed his hand upon the boy's shoulder, and said, If I fail, you must remember who I was. The child nodded through tears. Then everything disappeared. Rowan found himself back beside the doorway, gasping for air. What was that? A promise. Who was the child? The keeper stared directly into his eyes. You? Rowan stepped backward. That's impossible. It should be. I've never been here before. Not in this lifetime. The keeper closed his eyes. The soul does not always begin where the body does. Before Rowan could process those impossible words, the doorway behind them suddenly burst open, not with light, with darkness. Something moved inside, slowly, a gigantic silhouette. 2 glowing golden eyes opened within the blackness. Then came a voice so heavy it seemed to shake the stars themselves. Little keeper, have you finally brought me home? The voice rolled across the valley like distant thunder, not angry, not cruel, just impossibly tired. The enormous silhouette stepped through the doorway. The ground groaned beneath its weight. It stood nearly 30 feet tall. Its body was covered in black scales that shimmered like polished obsidian. Yet beneath the cracks, Rowan could glimpse veins of warm golden light, as though another being struggled to shine through from within. Twisted horns curved behind its head. Its hands ended in claws capable of splitting stone. Across its chest hung chains forged from silver runes, and resting upon its brow was the sacred crown. It looked exactly as every legend had described, and nothing like the monster Rowan had imagined. The creature lowered itself onto one knee. Its burning eyes never left Rowan. "So many years," its voice cracked, "I feared no one would remember." The last keeper bowed his head. "My king." The monster smiled sadly. "No, I have not been a king for centuries. I have only been a prison." Rowan could barely force the words out. "You're still alive?" "For now." The creature slowly placed one claw over the crown. "It grows weaker. I cannot hold him much longer." A deep, hollow laugh echoed from somewhere inside the monster's chest. It wasn't the king laughing. Something else lived beneath his skin. The golden light dimmed for a heartbeat, then returned. The king winced in pain. "He hears everything." The keeper stepped forward. "We don't have much time. The island is descending. The Hollow King is awakening." The monster nodded. "I know." He looked toward Rowan. "The dream brought you because there is only one path left." "I don't want the crown," Rowan blurted out. "I don't want to become a monster." The king's expression filled with compassion. "Neither did I." Silence lingered between them. Then the king raised one enormous claw. The air rippled. Golden light spread across the valley. Suddenly, Rowan saw memories, not his own, but the king's. He saw a young ruler laughing with his family. He saw crowded festivals, children running through palace gardens. He saw victories won without hatred. He saw peace. Then came the bargain. The Hollow King had not been defeated. It had offered humanity a choice. "Give me your world, or give me one soul to guard me forever." The first king had chosen without hesitation, not because he wished to be remembered, because someone had to. The crown had never granted power. It had demanded sacrifice. Every ruler afterward had inherited that burden willingly. History had forgotten them, but they had never betrayed humanity. The memories faded. Rowan's eyes filled with tears. "You saved everyone." The king lowered his head. "We all did." Another laugh erupted from inside him, this one louder, crueler. The chains across his chest cracked. One shattered completely. The sky darkened. Far above, the floating island trembled. Ancient towers collapsed. Massive fragments crashed toward the kingdom. Far below, the shadow armies reached the capital walls. The battle had begun. The keeper turned toward Rowan. "It is time." "No. You know it is. There has to be another way." "There never has been." Rowan clenched his fists. "There must be." His mind raced through everything he had learned, every journal, every dream, every word. Then one sentence from his father's notes echoed in his memory. "The crown does not create monsters. It reveals them." He looked at the king, then at the crown, then back at the keeper. "I finally understand." Neither of them spoke. "The crown isn't corrupting people. It is forcing them to fight alone." The keeper frowned. "What do you mean?" "The Hollow King feeds on isolation. It erases memories. It separates people. The guardian always carries the burden alone." He looked directly into the monster's eyes. "That's the real prison." The king's expression changed. Hope. For the first time in centuries, Rowan stepped forward. "I'm not going to replace you. I'm going to stay with you." The keeper's eyes widened. "You cannot." "Why not?" "Because no one has ever done such a thing." "Exactly." Before anyone could stop him, Rowan grabbed the crown. Pain exploded through every nerve in his body. Darkness flooded his mind. The Hollow King's voice filled his thoughts. "Another child? Another lonely hero? You will forget them all." Images disappeared around him, faces blurred, names vanished. His parents, Mira, the village, everything began dissolving. The Hollow King laughed. "That is how I win." Then another hand grabbed the crown. Mira! She had followed him. "I remembered," she whispered. She wrapped both hands around Rowan's arm. "You don't carry this alone." The darkness faltered. The Hollow King roared. More hands followed. The last keeper, then Celine, then the royal guards who had tracked them. One by one they reached the crown. Every person who touched it saw memories of those who had sacrificed before them. They wept. They understood. Far away, the soldiers defending the capital suddenly saw flashes of the same memories. Then the citizens, then children, then elders. The crown was no longer hiding the truth. It was sharing it. Across the entire kingdom, everyone witnessed the forgotten kings, every sacrifice, every farewell, every lonely century. People who had cursed their rulers now fell to their knees, not from fear, from gratitude. The Hollow King's laughter turned into furious screams. No, they must forget. Golden light burst from the crown, not outward, inward. The memories flowed into the Hollow King itself. Every name it had erased, every face it had stolen, every forgotten life returned all at once. The creature hidden inside the prison staggered beneath a weight it had never known. Memory, connection, love, things it could never consume. The black scales covering the king began breaking apart. The chains dissolved into streams of light. The floating island stopped descending. Across the battlefield, every shadow creature froze. Their empty armor collapsed harmlessly onto the earth. The crimson clouds above the island slowly faded into blue. The Hollow King's voice grew weaker. Impossible! They remembered? Its darkness unraveled into thousands of tiny fragments that drifted upward like black ashes before disappearing into the morning sky. For the first time in thousands of years. Silence. Real silence. The crown slipped from the king's head. Instead of falling, it crumbled into shimmering golden dust. The prison had fulfilled its purpose. The monster shrank. The horns vanished. The claws became hands once more. The scales dissolved into light. Standing where the creature had been was a man, young again. The first king. No armor, no weapons, only simple white robes. He looked exactly as Rowan had seen him in the memories. He smiled, not like a ruler, like someone finally allowed to rest. He approached Rowan. "You found the answer. None of us could." Rowan shook his head. "I didn't. We all did." The king laughed softly. "Perhaps that is why you succeeded." He looked toward Mira. "You refused to let him stand alone." She smiled through tears. "I promised our parents I never would." The king nodded. "A promise stronger than any magic." He turned toward the keeper. "My old friend." The keeper's eyes overflowed with tears. "I failed to save you." "No, you kept hope alive. That was enough." The rising sun broke through the clouds. Its light washed across the valley. The floating island slowly descended, not as a weapon, but gently, settling beyond the mountains where it would become part of the world once again. Ruined towers no longer looked cursed. They looked peaceful, ancient, waiting to be explored. The king's body gradually became transparent. "My time is over." Rowan stepped forward. "Will people remember you now?" The king looked toward the distant capital where church bells had begun ringing on their own. This time, not in warning, in celebration. "They already do?" With one final smile, he placed a hand on Rowan's shoulder. "Protect the truth. Then the first king dissolved into countless golden lights that rose into the sky like a new constellation. For a long moment, no one spoke. The kingdom had expected another war. Instead, it had recovered something far more valuable, its memory, and from that day forward, the Hall of Kings was opened once again, not to display a cursed crown, but to honor every guardian who had willingly become a monster, so that everyone else could remain human. If this story captured your imagination, there's much more to come. Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you never miss a new tale. Until next time, take care and keep wondering.